Hello, everyone. And I wanted to come talk to you with something special. I've never done it before. Recently, Ryan Pagella and Matt Dobrovolsky joined me to talk about a D23 recap and all of the announcements from the studio and from the parks. And after recording that, and while talking through some of those things, I thought of a few things for the parks that I'm really, really excited for. Some things that I hope will happen, and then some predictions that I happen. I've never done anything prediction related, but really, I just wanted to do it to look back and see how many of these I've gotten wrong, how many of these are completely off base. Um, and so that'll be something that's kind of fun. So what I want to do first, I want to talk about the things that were announced at Disneyland and the things that I'm really, really excited about at Disneyland. So there were a number of announcements made at Disneyland. One was an extensive expansion of Avengers Campus. And this sounds really, really cool. Last year, we were able to go to Disneyland for the first time. We went to California Adventure. Avengers Campus is an incredible place. And yes, it does need more there. We knew we were getting more with whatever e-ticket attraction was going to be opening there. And what we saw was during D23, the announcement was made. It was going to be called Infinity Defense, where you are going to have to join up with the Avengers in the Avengers Infinity Defense to defeat King Thanos. So that will be one e-ticket attraction that's going on. Another really, really cool thing that is going into Avengers Campus is a Stark Flight Lab where it's going to feel like, you're testing out the Stark technology and the Iron Man technology. So that looks really, really cool as well. That's one thing I'm excited about from Disneyland. I'm also excited about Coco being in the parks for the first time and seeing what that's going to look like. The graphic they showed at D23 was boats riding through the land of Coco and riding into through that story. And so that will be something that's really, really fun and interesting to see. And I would expect in the future that to possibly be brought over in some capacity to Magic Kingdom. And I know there have been a lot of times people have talked about what if Coco replaced the ride in the Mexico Pavilion. But what was really interesting in our discussion for the D23 recap is Matt Dobrovolsky actually is the one who brought up, what about the queue? If you have a ride of this magnitude, what do you have to do to that Mexico Pavilion just in order to fit the queue? Which is a really, really good question. And so I would expect that this Coco is brought over in some capacity, possibly not in the Mexico Pavilion, but you never know as well. The last thing that was announced at Disneyland that I'm really interested in, I'm excited for and interested in hearing more about is the live or the audio animatronic of Walt Disney that is going to play in the Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln Theater, and is going to rotate with Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. I think that will be very, very interesting. One, to see what it looks like. That's exciting, and to see what that's going to look like. Also, how they're going to do it. And the discussion around it will be really, really interesting to me. How do people feel about this? They have worked with the family, they have spoken with the family, but also how are they going to do this? How are they going to implement this? What is going to be the discussion around all of this? So now let's get on to Magic Kingdom. And specifically, there are seven things that I want to talk about with the Magic Kingdom announcements. There's really five uh, maybe predictions from the announcements that were made at D23. And then there are two that I think would be really, really interesting to happen. So maybe are more in that line of, I really, really hope this happens at one point. But let's go ahead and start with The first announcement being Cars Land being added to Frontierland in Magic Kingdom. And the graphics that they showed that Cars Land would essentially take the place of much of the rivers of America. And that has been debated over the last week and a half since the announcement has been made. Um, but what I think is really, really interesting is from some of the graphics and some of the visuals that they showed, like you can see Big Thunder Mountain where it's going to be, you can see where Frontierland is, you can see where Tiana's Bayou Adventure is. In some of the graphics, one thing that I brought up in our recap and one prediction, quasi prediction I have is what if the Rivers of America becomes the track for either the ride or a walking track? A walking space. And also, listening to Lou Mongello and WDW Radio talk, he's the one that brought up that there are going to be a lot of water elements in this as well. So that it's yet to be seen if all of the rivers of America is going to be going away. What's going to happen with that? Another thing that I think, so that's the first thing on Cars Land. The second thing on Cars Land that I think is really, really interesting is it is set in a frontier setting. It's supposed to be in Frontier Land. However, it is a ride that is going to resemble Radiator Springs Racers in California Adventure. So that's why I first thought, what if this track is just a part of the rivers of America? The second observation from all of this is, to me, the setting looks very much like the Western frontier or Western expansion, and specifically the Rocky Mountain area. It has a lot of mountains where you're going to be racing around these mountains. You're going to be walking in this land around these mountains. And one thing that I haven't heard anybody else mention is, to me, the 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 setting looks a lot like the setting from Planes, Fire, and Rescue. That was a Disney movie. After Cars came out, Disney made Planes and they advertised it as from the or above the world of planes. So they sort of advertised it as existing in this same kind of metaverse, if you will, with the Cars franchise. Now, Cars is Disney Pixar, Planes is Disney Animation. However, it did make me think the setting for this new Cars Land, whatever it's going to be called in Frontierland at the Magic Kingdom, because of the setting, I wonder if there are going to be any elements from Planes, from the Disney movie Planes, and especially Planes, Fire and Rescue. Because if you've never seen either movie, they're really entertaining. Uh, Fire and Rescue didn't do as well at the box office as the company would have wanted. But the setting is very, very beautiful. It looks, the whole story takes place sort of in like a frontier land surrounded by mountains. So that would be interesting to see. Are there going to be any elements of the Planes franchise in this new Cars Land? And it could be an opportunity for the company to highlight the Planes movies that are streaming on Disney Plus now as well. So now on to my third area that I want to talk about. It was announced that Hollywood Studios is getting its second Pixar themed land, and it's going to be Monsters Incorporated. Okay. And so this was really, really exciting for many, many reasons. One reason it's really exciting is it is going to include the first um, coaster that in coaster in a Disney park that the track is going to be above you. So it's going to be the first suspended coaster in a Disney park. It's going to be like you're flying through the doors like they do in the Monsters universe, which will be really, really interesting. The Monsters Inc. universe, I should say, which will be really, really interesting, and really, really fun. I what a lot of the talk around Monsters Incorporated land has been is, where is it going to go? Is it going to go into Animation Courtyard, where now you have Star Wars Launch Bay, you have uh, the Little Mermaid show, which will open up soon. You have Disney Junior. After you get past Disney Junior into that area, or that area doesn't have a lot of crowd in the park right now. Is it going to go there, or is it going to go into the Muppets courtyard? And a lot of people have expressed their desire that it not go in the Muppets courtyard, because Muppets in 3D, Muppet Vision 3D being the last thing that Jim Henson worked on before he passed away. It's completely understandable. And I love the Muppets. I love walking in that courtyard. Some of the pictures that they showed of Monsters Incorporated definitely can look like it possibly would fit in portions of Muppets Courtyard. However, where is the space for the show building that would be needed for the roller coaster and for the suspended coaster that they're going to put in this new Monsters Incorporated land? So my my thought is it's going to go in Animation Courtyard for a few reasons. It doesn't have a lot of capacity right now as a land in the park, especially after Disney Junior shows stop for the day. It's either 4 or 5 p.m. in each day. There's hardly anybody over there. The Little Mermaid show is about to open back up, but that doesn't mean that it can't exist and Monsters Incorporated land exists beside it. Disney Junior is a theater that I think could exist somewhere else in Hollywood studios, possibly. And a big reason is there was a tweet sent out this past week, from somebody who is supposed to work at the office, at the old animation office in Hollywood studios, that said they are having to vacate their office. They're moving out of a park. And so, excuse me, that led a lot of people to believe that maybe it was going to go in there. Those are pretty sizable buildings that are behind those structures, which, if that is the case and they are moving offices and they are trying to reuse those buildings where some animated movies were made when Hollywood Studios, or MGM Studios at the time, first opened. Um, that's a lot of space that possibly they could build a coaster and a queue area and everything in there. So I feel like it would probably go over into Animation Courtyard. One thing people haven't talked about is the possibility that, what if it goes over to where Indiana Jones Epic Stuntacular is? Because they are opening up the Tropical Americas and Animal Kingdom. Another thing I'm really, really excited about, both for Indiana Jones ride and for Casita, walking through the Casita. That would be so much fun, or riding through the Casita from Encanto. Um, so I guess it could go over there. However, to me, it does make a lot of sense if it were to go in Animation Courtyard. However, that brings me to my uh, loose prediction, I'll say. Um, a lot of the Muppet movies and Muppet stories have been about how they are on the brink of losing their theater or being shut down, or they are bankrupt and they need to raise money. It would be an incredible bit of storytelling if an announcement came that Monsters Incorporated, after thorough discussion, the company believed Monsters Incorporated would be best placed in Muppet Courtyard. And so the Muppets are going to lose their theater, they're going to lose their courtyard, and then from there, based on what would be the fan outcry, but also starting with a storyline of the Muppets trying to save Muppet Courtyard and their Muppet Vision 3D theater. And then lo and behold, at the 11th hour before they start to construct Monsters Incorporated, obviously this would all be planned beforehand, but before the public is told they are going to construct Monsters Incorporated land, something happens and the Muppets come through. They raise the money to keep Muppet Vision 3D theater open and keep Muppet Courtyard open. That would be really, really interesting to me. I think I know there are some restaurants over in Pizza Rizzo and Muppet Vision or Muppet Courtyard that would make sense to turn into a restaurant for uh, Monsters Incorporated land. I think there are also ways that they could put a restaurant in Monsters Incorporated land without having to do that. Possibly even team up with another existing kitchen to get food from for Monsters Incorporated land. So that's my prediction on Monsters Incorporated land. I think it's going to go in Animation Courtyard, but it would be really, really cool storytelling if the story was that it was going to go in Vision Theater, Muppet Vision 3D Theater. It's going to go in Muppet Courtyard, and then the Muppets raise money. They save their theater. They save the courtyard. That would be a really, really cool bit of storytelling on Disney's part, I think. The fourth thing I want to talk about, and actually is the fourth and fifth thing, but Villains Land was announced that it is coming to Magic Kingdom, and that got a lot of applause. It got a lot of positive reaction online. It'll be something that will be really, really cool to have there. So here are my two predictions. This was announced originally at D23 in 2022 about Beyond Big Thunder. Okay. And if you look at blueprints or not blueprints, if you look at Google Maps and everything of the layout of the Magic Kingdom, there is a lot of space behind um, Big Thunder Mountain. And that's where people believe this is projected to go because of the announcement at D23 and also looking at maps of the Magic Kingdom. Also, if you look behind New Fantasyland, there are a lot of buildings back there for cast members to enter into the Magic Kingdom. And yes, those buildings could be moved. They could be constructed somewhere else. However, it seems like the place it's probably going to go is beyond Big Thunder Mountain. So here's my first prediction about Villains Land. Not about the rides or anything that's going to be in, but when Disney has built a new land, they've had two entrances to that land. You look at Pandora in Disney's Animal Kingdom. You look at Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland and in Hollywood Studios. You look at Toy Story Land in Hollywood Studios. When they've built new lands, they want two entrances where they can get more people in and out easier through two access points. So you can walk through the story one way or the opposite way, however you want. My prediction is, I think it would be an impossible hope is there would have to be an entrance from Big Thunder Mountain, which actually will take you possibly through Cars Land, onto Big Thunder Mountain, beyond the Big Thunder Mountain onto Villains Land. That's also one of the reasons that Matt talked about in our show about why the rivers of America would probably need to go away is for crowd flow, because that does take up a lot of space where crowds cannot walk, and it would get very, very congested if people are having to walk around by Tiana's Bayou Adventure and Big Thunder Mountain. They're having to walk around the rivers of America, or even if a path is cut from the Haunted Mansion over to Villains Land, it would get very, very congested there. So what I think would be really cool and a quasi prediction or a prediction is if they have two entrances, and they could have three, they could have one that goes past Big Thunder Mountain, that could be themed pretty cool to like kind of getting darker and darker till you get to Villains Land. But let's say they have a path from past the Haunted Mansion as well. You walk past the Haunted Mansion, and that is one of the entrances to Villains Land. How cool would it be if when you're walking there, you're actually walking in the story of the Headless Horseman and Ichabod Crane? That would be really, really cool if you're walking in Sleepy Hollow. And yes, there's a Sleepy Hollow in Liberty Land, so it kind of makes sense. It could build off of that. You could start in Liberty Square, sorry, walk past Haunted Mansion, and then you get into that forest where the chase happens in the movie. And that would be one entrance into Villains Land, I think would be really, really cool. And then I think they would have an entrance from Fantasyland as well, because Villains Land makes sense with Fantasyland, right? And So the passage from Fantasyland, it would be a little bit longer possibly, but the passage from Fantasyland, what if it is the scary forest from Snow White? Harkening back to the very first animated movie ever made, the first one obviously made by the company, and you walk through that forest to get to Villain's Land. The one where she saw the trees, she thought the trees had eyes, she saw eyes and behind the trees and everything, it turned out to be the animals. Where when you are closer to Fantasyland and you're walking, you can see like the trees don't have eyes. You can see the eyes of the animals and everything. But then as you get closer to Villain's Land, it gets a little darker and darker and darker. By the time you get to Villain's Land, you're seeing the trees have eyes and you're seeing, it's a little more on edge, if you will. So that's one prediction for Villain's Land. Another prediction that we talked about, prediction slash hope that we talked about on the recap, is with all of this added capacity to Magic Kingdom with Cars Land and with Villains Land, that's going to be a lot more people visiting the Magic Kingdom for those two lands. And we're not even talking about Tron and Tiana's Bayou Adventure and some of the other things that have recently been added. They're going to need more transportation to the park, right? If you're looking at buses from the resorts, the monorail, and the ferries that carry you over the lagoon to the Magic Kingdom, excuse me, it would be greatly alleviated. The traffic would be greatly alleviated with more transportation. What would that transportation be? Here's the prediction and hope. And we talked about this on the recap episode as well. But um, the Skyliner, extend the Skyliner to the Magic Kingdom. I would love the Skyliner to go everywhere around Walt Disney World, because I could go to Walt Disney World and just ride the Skyliner for an entire day, and that's it. But that's the hope and prediction. The Skyliner extending to the entrance of Magic Kingdom as well. How cool would that be? Um, the sixth prediction is, and these are things that were not announced. So, really quickly, one thing that has been talked about over the last few years, from time to time, is, will Rock and Roller Coaster ever be rethemed? Rock and Roller Coaster featuring Aerosmith, will it ever be rethemed? And it is an incredibly popular roller coaster. The only roller coaster in Walt Disney World that has an inverted loop now. And so it's incredibly popular, and the name Aerosmith and the lure of Aerosmith, people have talked about, will that ever kind of fade away a little bit or fade out a little bit? Will it be rethemed? If it's rethemed, I've heard people talk about put Goofy movie in, put other things in. Here's my prediction. There is one international mega superstar that Disney has tried to court at various times throughout her career. And if we go back and we look at the being a fan of Disney, the podcast, and I spoke to people about this a few months back, and it is show class number 146, if anybody wants to go listen to that. And we talked about how Disney, throughout her career, seemingly has tried to court Taylor Swift, even to the point of now that her Eras tour, when her Eras tour went in the movie theaters, she distributed that by herself, or her company distributed that by herself. They did not go with a traditional movie. They didn't go with the traditional movie studio to distribute that film. It ended up on Disney Plus. And we talked in that episode. We also talked in this most recent episode about D23 recap, whether that was part of the negotiation or not, to for Disney to say, here, you take this and you make as much money off of this movie as you want in the theaters. Let's negotiate and have this the Eras Tour movie on Disney Plus, because it has been very successful for Disney Plus. By the way, if you want to listen to the D23 recap, it's class number 160. So my prediction is, if that Aerosmith Rock and Roller Coaster, it's rethemed, when it's rethemed, it'll be rethemed to Taylor Swift, and Disney will be able to get closer ties to Taylor Swift, which I believe they've wanted to do throughout her career. My last prediction, the seventh prediction slash hope, is we didn't hear anything at D23 about Figment and about the Imagination Pavilion and the ride at that pavilion. And this is something that people have wanted to hear a lot about, I know. There's, there are rumors that there's a movie in production, early production about Figment, possibly even Figment and the Dreamfinder. It'd be amazing if they brought the Dreamfinder back a few years ago, about, I don't know, 8, 9 years ago now. Marvel made comics about Figment that had the Dreamfinder in it. It was kind of more steampunk-esque, if you will, the way that they drew the characters. And so here's something that would be really, really cool, I think. A prediction, possibly, but just really, really cool, and I hope would happen as well. We didn't hear a lot about Figment, or we didn't hear anything about Figment. Figment is now the kind of unofficial mascot of Epcot, right? So he's not going to go anywhere, but the ride probably needs to have something done with it. Another thing we did not hear anything about at D23, announcement-wise, is Inside Out. Inside Out 2 is right now the highest grossing movie of 2024 at this moment. It might be passed by Deadpool and Wolverine or some of the later movies that are going to come, because we do have Moana 2 coming. We also have the Lion King sequel coming. However, that most of that money will probably be made in 2025. But um, Inside Out does not have a strong presence in the Walt Disney World parks. And even if you go to Disneyland and you go to California Adventure, there's one ride that was just sort of a rethemed ride to Inside Out Emotional Whirlwind or Emotional Spin. Um, there's been rumors that Inside Out could a ride could take over the Imagination Pavilion. And it does make sense because if you remember during the pandemic when they were not having character meet and greets, they would have people, or they would have characters just kind of play around in their natural environment. Inside Out characters, Joy showed up around Imagination Pavilion. That was her area where she played around in the grass beside the pavilion. Figment, the character, one of the movies he shows up in is Inside Out. When they're walking through Imagination Land, he shows up as a portrait in Imagination Land. So they could retheme that pavilion, keep it Imagination Pavilion because it, that fit with the movie. Um, and they could retheme a ride in there featuring Figment. It could be, let's say, the Imagination Pavilion or the Inside Out Imagination Pavilion presented by Figment or featuring Figment. Figment will stay in whatever capacity he needs to stay. I think that's pretty clear at this point. The company does not want to get rid of him because of his popularity. But also, one of the things that was announced during the studio presentation is the Dreamlight productions, the shows that are going to be made for Disney Plus based on the dreams that Riley had in Inside Out, the first Inside Out movie. And so there could be a ride that kind of goes in with that. It would be a great way to, one, get more capacity on that side of the park, get more capacity in that pavilion, um, keep Figment and have Figment become a central role. I mean, could you imagine if there's a pavilion featuring Figment or a pavilion presented by Figment? I mean, he is, he could greet you as you walk in. There's already the meet and greet that's at the Imagination Pavilion, but to kind of elevate him in that pavilion as well. And then give Inside Out a presence at the Walt Disney World parks. I think that would be a really, really cool thing. So those are kind of what I'm excited about. My predictions. I didn't mention the new Pandora Land opening up in Disneyland or California Adventure. That's going to be really, really cool as well. And the Disneyland Forward project, where now there's so much more land out at Disneyland. I very briefly mentioned my excitement about Indiana Jones, one of my favorite characters, getting a ride, replacing the dinosaur ride at in Animal Kingdom. As a lot of people know, the track layouts or the technology is the same. The track layouts are very, very similar. And my excitement of getting either a ride through Casita, a walk through Casita, a walk by Casita, whatever with from Encanto and Tropical Americas. There were so many announcements. There was a lot to be excited about. Um, those were in particular seven things that after sitting with it for about a week and a half, I thought, hey, what if this happens? And so let me know what your predictions are. Let me know how wrong you think my predictions are, or if you think I'm on the right track anywhere. It will be really, really fun to listen to this as these things are built and as more things are announced, and just kind of come back and take note of all the things that um, maybe we're a little bit correct. Maybe we're completely wrong. Maybe we're not even in the same universe as what was being thought. That's the fun things about these things. So hope you enjoy. Let me know your thoughts and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.